Hey there, welcome to episode 105 of the Caffe Genius Impressarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 5:30 p.m. on Friday, February 28, 2025, the end of a eventful month, depending on where you are on the planet. But I think everyone has felt this month in one way or another. Not always great. It's getting warm here in Vegas. Hopefully that will turn back around for at least a little bit longer. A little bit of winter would be nice. Today's episode is titled Season 2 Begins, because it does. Episode 104 was the end of Season 1. Episode 52 was the end of Season 0. So basically, figure one episode per week, and seasons are aligning by years for no particular reason other than for a snappy title. Episode 105, here it is. Caffe Genius Impressarios is named for Cafe Centro, a infamous but unfortunately no longer in business coffee shop that was located in South Park in San Francisco. Very, very near what is now the Oracle, but was at the time the AT&T ballpark. In fact, it was probably not the AT&T ballpark when it first opened, when I visited the Cafe Centro several times, and it did have two F's in the name. Cafe, two F's, and then Centro, C-E-N-T-R-O, Cafe Centro. The place where startups start. When I visited, it was indeed the AT&T ballpark. It was a nice spot to hang out. The park, with park benches and grass and everything. It's a place where several startups got their start in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco area in particular, including a small website no one has ever heard of, and I think they called it Twitter. As well, the Genius Lunch, which we used to have here in Vegas during the Downtown Project days, sometime after 2013. I think it was around 2015 probably. I was either working at Intel I think I was working at Intel at the time. I was not directly part of Downtown Project. Some of the Downtown Project people and Downtown Project adjacent, and then spectators like myself would gather every once in a while for what we called the Genius Lunch to talk about who was working on what was going on, what have you heard, what should you be hearing, etc. And then impresarios, those are people doing cool things. Impresario spelled with two S's. That is correct, although not common spelling. So you can check. I like going with unusual spellings to confuse people a tiny bit. Hey, that doesn't look right. No, it is. There's nothing wrong with that. Collaboratory is another one of my favorite words. You can spell it with two L's, as in collaboration, or one L, as in co-laboratory. It's subtle. Google does that as well. I think it's a good word. Anyway, Caffe Genius Impressarios, it's supposed to be an audio program about people here in the greater Vegas area in our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, and there are some other things that Caffe Genius is working on in that realm. It's been a good long time since we've had a guest, and since this is now the beginning of Season 2, it's as good a time as any to double down on the efforts to move back in that direction, at least occasionally. So that's on the to-do list. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes. The show notes are very, very brief today. The summary, which is one sentence, and it's not even very long, which I'll read to you, and the two links that are the shameless self-promotion variety, the same ones every week, for your host. And I will say that since this audio program is specifically aimed at having guests, the links are always labeled host for the host shameless self-promotion links. That's me. So there you go. Let me read this real quick, and then we can get in and out on this Friday. The summary is as follows. Ready to kick off Season 2 of Caffe Genius Impressarios with some random thoughts and updates in no particular order, then back to work. Exclamation point. I don't know if I did that justice. The links, as usual, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You can buy me a coffee, but you are under no obligation on either of these websites to do so. Any funds that do come in through either of these do, though, go towards coffee accessories. This is what powers these efforts. Buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo does have a profile page, which I use as a freeform link tree of sorts. There are links to all of the audio programs that I am producing each week, GitHub repositories for the various things I'm working on that are public, some biographical information, some links to my favorite coffee beans, keeping with that theme, and some other stuff. At the very top of the profile page, or at the very top of the web page, if you are viewing it in a web browser, I'm not sure about the mobile application for Buy Me a Coffee, you will find a link to posts. In the post section, you will find an exclusively published Buy Me an Update collection of episodes. Buy Me an Update that is exclusively hosted on and published via buymeacoffee.com. It is micro episodes, 5 minutes or less. A quick rundown on what you missed from the week before and what's coming up in the current week. I don't really plan episodes that far ahead unless I were to have a guest. Wouldn't that be neat? But it's a place that I will, or I have been using. I think we're on episode 15. I can tell you exactly. Yeah, we'll be on episode 15 on March 3rd. It's coming Monday. Published every Monday, early in the day. Hopefully more morning, but certainly early in the day. And it's a place to kind of out of band. I don't have to talk about the same thing in every episode. I can just say it once in the Buy Me an Update microcast, micro episodes, micro updates. It's one of those. So buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo posts. I've been toying with actually adding another link for those specifically, so I might do that next week. See how that goes. And Ko-fi.com/DanHugo, that's ko-fi.com/DanHugo. And if you haven't noticed, or if you're new here and you don't remember, DANHUGO, Dan Hugo, all one word in the links. Or if you see the links, you can just click on them. Or if you don't see the links, you can still click on them. Hopefully you're able to locate the episode description where these links are. Every week in all of my audio programs, across all of my programs, all of my episodes of all of my programs, I do try to include useful, interesting, informative, or reference links. So check those out in general. I do produce my audio programs very near a street, though indoors. Occasionally you will hear car traffic, automotive traffic. It's a fact of life here in Vegas. Let's get on with the show. Reminders, if you have heard this audio program before in previous episodes, one or more of the previous 104, not to mention episode 0, do not forget about Initiative 2025. I certainly have not, though as of this episode, the only people who really have heard the details spelled out are you, the listeners. I have emailed a few things out to a few people. A few people are interested or tell me more kind of thing. This being Vegas, a few people have said that and then disappeared. The ghost protocol is real in Vegas. But enabling this is the next step, which means getting the word out. So that's high on the list, big on the agenda. Writ large. Writ large, often used where at large should be used. But in this case, writ large, Initiative 2025, Initiative 2025, written in large characters. Writ large, written large. The Genius Roundtable version 2, or whatever this next approach will be called, was to commence in February. Really, it should have commenced in January, but clearly that's not going to happen. Basing this next attempt on communities of practice and trying for a broader reach into our Greater Vegas entrepreneurial innovation. I could say innovator. I wrote innovator, but I usually say innovation ecosystem because I could say entrepreneur innovator. That doesn't really sound right. So broader reach into the ecosystem will do quite a bit, I think, to make this a more useful and effective platform on which to perform analysis and more. Production by street. Analysis and more by people who are doing it on the ground. So the roundtable was the version 1, or the first time we did this, was composed of 7 basically solopreneurs. They're people that had their own business, but no storefront, no company, no employees. That was not a representative sample. It was not really a good basis for analysis. So version 2, or the second cohort, or however this would be labeled, should be far more diverse as far as who is doing what in the entrepreneurial space, who's doing what in the innovator space. Not everything is tech, as I'm fond of saying. So hopefully we'll gather a very large roundtable with multiple communities of practice, looking at different aspects of our local economy, our local entrepreneurial ecosystem, our local innovator ecosystem. Combine those together any way you like, and more, including, and this is something I try to impress upon people, and even the entrepreneurs in the room don't quite get it all the time. When you gather a room full of entrepreneurs, I think you're well within your right to expect those people to have their own ideas, their own take on things, their own possible improvements, tangential efforts that they would like to add to the mix and so on. So I'm really hoping we can gather together groups of people with that mindset who are not waiting to be told what to do. So we'll see. We'll learn what we can from the first cohort and move forward. The rolling introspection element of it's kind of the round table. It's something that came out of the round table, but it was also a notion that I've been bouncing around for quite some time. There's an element of the overall plan moving forward. It's part of the round table version too, but it's also part of some other things. It's a noisy day today on the road. So the rolling introspection is still on the table, of course, with it's largely an implementation issue to make it easy to go to and then to go back to on an ongoing basis to catch changes in opinion with regard to our ecosystem and its various moving parts, and maybe some of the moving people. Sometimes it's what, but other times it might be who. Honestly, the Downtown Project retrospective, which is a completely separate initiative, I suppose, as part of the Caffe Genius umbrella under it, the retrospective survey actually was mostly done. It was mostly done a few months after we finished the first cohort, and it didn't even take a few months to do, but it was just a question of finding some tools and jotting down some ideas and then constructing a survey that would look back at the Downtown Project from the perspective of someone who was either a part of it, adjacent, or maybe just a spectator, and to collect some thoughts on what worked and what did not, so that we could apply that to our own current ecosystem. So the idea with the rolling introspection is to ask very similar questions and then have or enable people to update their responses over time if things are improving or not improving. Do you feel there's enough response from different agencies that are encouraging entrepreneurialism, but then don't follow through or something like that? That one obviously is a little bit leading. The questions as written, I don't have them in front of me, but the survey, the retrospective survey, is a little bit more balanced, a lot more of your basic, strongly agree, strongly disagree type questions and answers and so on. Some things are expository, like describe this, how did this work, etc. Anyway, there's a nice collection. There's quite a few, so we have to make it palatable for people and then roll it out. And then obviously knowing about it will be half the battle. In either case, the Downtown Project retrospective will be, it's going to involve reaching out to people who may want the Downtown Project to live on in the past and not creep back into their present. But it will be coupled, at least loosely, to a rolling introspection so we can actually compare apples. The Downtown Project did exist in the same footprint, very similar to the current innovation district in the in the downtown Vegas area. And then the Downtown Project did touch the greater Vegas area in one way or another. So it would be interesting to see how they line up. And then the rolling introspection would, of course, move into the future so we could look at changes. What are we doing? What are we changing? And is it working? So what about entrepreneurs? I always talk about entrepreneurs and innovation. This is just my feeling based on what I read and hear about when I'm out and about, which is not as often as I could, I guess, but I should talk to more people. The springtime is upon us. But there seems to be some focus on training programs and introductory scenarios that encourage entrepreneurs to transition from aspiration to action, which is good. But the real interest, from what I'm seeing and hearing, what I've read, people that have been hired, the consolidation of some things, when we peel back a layer or two, is it's convincing existing companies to establish a presence or outright move to the greater Vegas area so they can start adding to our gross local product. The local economy and economic diversification efforts continue. Of course, there have been some changes of late. Might make that a challenge. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Changes at the federal level that impact changes at the state level, which will impact changes at the local level. Maybe one or more reminder. Let me try that again. Maybe one more reminder that dovetails off the roundtable reminder above. So another reminder about a reminder. Forming a cadre of entrepreneurs and residents has always been a part of that plan. It was part of the roundtable, starting with the first roundtable. It's been part of that, but it's also generally a good idea. And I've had this conversation with a few people that have agreed. It's to build a base of mentorship in this locality. So you could say in Vegas or around Vegas or in Clark County. These are not consultants. They are not. They're not service providers. They're not people that would be invoicing you for their input. It would be people who generally care about the state of the ecosystem, who have a stake in it. I've often said, it's not that you would be charging people to help them become new entrepreneurs. That transition to action from aspiration. Maybe a nascent entrepreneur who just needs to dial in the combination lock and open the door to get going. But the long tail for the entrepreneurs and residents would be where there's a return on that investment, but it's not a question of charging people for your time. It's about being a part of the machinery. Those who do it well and who embrace it and who add value become recognized and celebrated, and that comes back. So that's the business model there. Also, you wouldn't be, if you were an entrepreneur in residence. By the way, entrepreneur in residence is a real title, but it's often like a temporary title at a law firm or a venture capital company or a university, perhaps. Someone who's an entrepreneurial between entrepreneurial adventures. But in this case, probably more entrepreneurs who are really doing it, but who have some time to spare investing in the ecosystem itself for long tail returns. And so those people would become well known and so on. So the value proposition is fairly simple. Be good, help others, and it will come back. If we can establish some sort of mentorship platform in the greater Vegas area, hopefully we'll see those aspirational and nascent entrepreneurs enter the pool, jump in, feet first perhaps, and see what happens. And they have to understand that not every entrepreneurial adventure is successful, but you'll never know if you sit on the couch wondering. Having some classes and wishing people the best is one thing. That's happening now. But providing fertile ground, good weather, and some mentor bees to float between entrepreneurial flowers is going to be essential for near-term success in almost any way we define it. And I'll apologize for taxing that metaphor a bit there. This cannot be stressed enough. Over-focus on the tech sector and convincing some small group of LinkedIn followers that Las Vegas is the next Silicon Valley, which it is not, does a disservice to the capable and perhaps even more vibrant non-tech or perhaps tech-adjacent entrepreneurial innovation scene within our ecosystem, which is where people are starting their own businesses and growing them, and they are not trying to be the next Facebook or Tesla, which is probably a bad idea to be aiming for for some reason. Reasons. Be good at the business you want to be. Maybe you want to launch a social network or whatever, but doing what you love. They do say when you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. Get that out of your mind. But doing something you love or want to accomplish just to see if you can do it or whatever your motivation is, you should do it because you want to, not because you want to be a part of the next Silicon Valley silliness that sometimes invades people's news feeds here. I avoid those posts. What about innovation? We need to bring back hackathons. We need to recognize and celebrate those who participate and excel along those lines, whether it's in a formal hackathon or just doing innovative things. And hackathons do not need to be in tech, by the way, development of mobile apps and so on. A hackathon is a methodology and not a specification for a laptop bro all-nighter. Hackathon is a way of ideating in a structure that provides a little bit of encouragement with a ticking clock, if you like. Maybe some prizes. It depends. Not all hackathons need to be local either. Every year there are challenges, different possibilities. The Congressional Apps Challenge is coming up. NASA Space Apps Challenge. Those do happen to be tech focused, but the NASA Space Apps Challenge actually enables people who are rather tech adjacent, and they're definitely aimed at younger people. So think about that. We need to make innovation culture a focus for the next decade or more, just to get started for real. But wait, hasn't innovation been a focus here? I would not agree. Not a real focus. Anything from coffee shops to libraries to school facilities to explicitly designed maker spaces should be identified and marked with availability policies so that those looking for a place to ideate and innovate can do so. The asset map, which I have mentioned previously, is high on the to-do list for this reason. The asset map has other things in it, but maker spaces and other similar resources for co-working and whatnot, especially free or completely reasonably priced without commitment, coffee shops, bookshops, libraries, places where especially young people can go and collaborate, be encouraged to do so. As I have also said many times, age 12 or so, 7th grade on a normal public school timeline, is when we should be turning on the lights and pulling out the stops for budding entrepreneurial innovators. Now, one can be one or the other, entrepreneur, innovator, but we should be enabling and encouraging both, perhaps together, to provide a decade of runway until graduation, or equivalent. Now, I'm a college person. I graduated from college. I was 21. Then I turned 22 like 30 days later. So for me, age 12 to 22 would have put me at the end of college, right? So 10 years. Do you have to go to college? Not necessarily, but a 10-year plan, structured or otherwise, through a public school system, a private school system, a college curriculum, a vocational curriculum, something similar, self-directed, apprenticeship, something. Figure on 10 years. And then in your early 20s, go for it. Now, it doesn't mean you have to wait. Entrepreneurs can do amazing things at age 12, but we're talking the 80% rule here. So most people will be doing some cool things by the time they're in their low 20s. You can do that, or you can get started earlier. That's fine. You can also get started later. That's also fine. How about your stuff? Where does that figure into this? Well, this audio program is supposed to be about the ecosystem, and it is designed to include your stories in the form of participation in episodes like interviews and discussions about what you are doing, maybe how you are doing it, and where the Greater Vegas ecosystem is working, where and how, or maybe where it is not. For season 2, starting today, I'm really hoping to draw in some of the entrepreneurs out there who can tell their story while also reflecting on the larger picture, the terrain on which they're building their futures. The interconnectedness of all things in this regard makes every story unique, but also a part of the fabric, and ultimately a view on how to evaluate the whole thing. And again, what's working, what isn't, what can we improve? How can we elevate? It is probably obvious the workings of the roundtable should intersect with individual discussions. Ideally, we can fit in some episodes about not only individual entrepreneurial efforts or innovative efforts, with perhaps more than one entrepreneur driving. So that is, one entrepreneurial effort could have 2, 3, 5, 10 founders, co-founders, people making it happen. So this is not like a one-on-one thing. It could be, depends. But also some of the community of practice people who are pulling apart the ecosystem and critiquing its properties so that we can put it back together better, stronger, faster. Do I have any $6 million person fans out there? Since there were more than one $6 million person out there, you can take your pick. What about my stuff? I have talked about Innovate for Vegas Foundation now and then on this audio program, and there's still the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program that you can find in a coffee link in the links section of this episode and every episode before it. We have been looking at the culture of innovation and enabling hackathons and community elevating initiatives for nearly 3 years now. It'll be 3 years in June since we formed the actual Nevada nonprofit corporation, and then we became a 501c3 public charity, which was retroactive to June 16th, I think it was, 2022. So we're trying to do that and more on the horizon. I'm the managing director. Wait, why not the executive director? Well, if you look up the common use of those two titles, The executive director is more like, I'm not going to say ceremonial, but it's like, yeah, I show up for the meetings and I'm in charge and I'm like a chairperson or something. Managing director is like a working manager. If you've ever worked in a place where you're working with your manager on the work you're doing, and then that person is also responsible for being a manager. So the managing director is actually part of the day-to-day, but is also a member of the board of directors. Managing director, that's me. Call me entrepreneurial. The My Muni and Welcome initiatives from the Innovate for Vegas Foundation will form the basis of MuniBits, which we can use to help with information sharing in our smart city. So it's kind of a purpose-built platform for information sharing using, from the ground up, modern methodologies and proven protocols and technologies. That's a long story for another time, but the effort would be to enable a smart city or a so-called smart city to connect people. I'll give you an example here in Vegas. You may not know this. When you're listening to this sometime after February 28th, you might think, I never even knew that. But about 5 days ago, and I can't even tell you exactly when, but say February 23rd-ish, maybe on the weekend before, 2021, 22, who knows? There was a turbidity warning or a boil water directive from the water district in the greater Vegas area. What does that mean? That means that the water treatment process had been contaminated or corrupted in some way. There were repairs being affected on some of the plumbing of the system. So they advise people, if you're going to use your tap water for anything other than laundry or showering or something, but if it's going to enter your system, your personal vessel, if you're going to drink it or cook with it, make coffee, etc., you should boil it first and make sure that it is completely clean and clear of stuff. Turbidity, look up that word. It's a good word, and it's something to be aware of. How did people find out about this? I don't even remember where I noticed it, but I found something that said, oh, by the way, don't forget there's a boil water directive. Really? Good luck finding this stuff out. I always tell people, why is there, if you visit the local news media websites, they have a weather bug in the corner, like in an upper corner of like the Review Journal site. I think the Review Journal has one. Let me do a little sanity check here. Review Journal, yes, has a little, it says 71 Fahrenheit sunny today. The Las Vegas Sun might have one. Las Vegas Sun. No weather bug. Amazing. I know the Channel 8 website does, et cetera, et cetera. So weather appears in these places, but where do you go if you don't know to look for it? How would I know that there's a weather boil directive? Boil water directive. How would I know to look for that if I'm not coming across it by accident, which luckily I did? So these are the sorts of things that if the city of Las Vegas or the greater Vegas area believes itself to be a smart city, a smart area, it kind of has to live up to that. And part of that is people being able to find information not by, I know luck plays a big part in the Vegas culture over the last 100 years, but we should be able to determine these things from useful information sources that we can rely on and that are easy to find. So that's part of the, those are some of the components of the MuniBits, I don't want to say project, the MuniBits platform that would come from My Muni and Welcome. My Muni used to be called My Vegas, but it's now more generic, My Muni, My Community, My Municipality. And Welcome is for people visiting. And since we have 40 million visitors every year, if the LVCVA, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, is to be believed, it feels like 40 million, then we should be able to construct a platform that can work for both populations and be equally useful, not only in sharing information, but capturing it. Hence our open data capture platform initiative, and the list goes on. It's also intended to be a platform on which we might build experiments in this area, geographical area, to make a smarter smart city with input from and collaboration with other innovators. And you do not need to be in Vegas to innovate for Vegas. So we would open up this development, which is always true anyway. We would open up development of these open source initiatives and component projects to collaboration with others in other cities, so that MuniBits, Muni, community or municipality, bits as in data, information? Both. MuniBits should be able to work anywhere. It's not a Vegas-only effort. So that should be something. And so I'm working on that. And then there are some other things that have been on the back burner for too long, including a mobile vendor platform, think food trucks. That's been on the back burner for way too long. And it's still in the I think this would work catalog. So I still want to do it. There have been many challenges, which I've talked about previously, and I will talk about them again at some point. A special dietary requirements tool that I call, I'll tell you later, for people who have, I can't eat gluten, I can't eat onions, I can't eat juniper berries. These are all true stories. And one of the newest notions, a scheme to connect innovation from Vegas and beyond with its 40 million annual visitors in a structured and valuable way for both sides so that innovators, inventors, new product companies can engage with our visiting population, and they can encounter innovation in our smart city and possibly provide feedback to those innovators. Maybe even go home with the thing or have one waiting on their porch if it isn't stolen when they get home. So those are a couple things. I have some other things. Basically, I think Vegas is an unusual place. The communications culture, which I've done an episode on previously and recently, is awful. There is a tendency for people to simply not respond, not to get back to. I recently set up a meeting on someone's Calendly. So I picked a time and a day. They acknowledged the meeting. 2 minutes into the allotted, at the appointed time, 2 minutes in, I get an email, running late. I said, okay. How about if I give me your number and I'll call you later? I said, okay, here's my number. Probably just call me directly. We don't have to use, I think it was Microsoft Teams. That was weeks ago. Never heard. Because this is Vegas. Nothing is new in Vegas. It's always the same. There's always this tendency to focus on what I need and what I'm doing. And if I need something from someone else, yes, I will contact them. When I stop needing something from someone else, I will stop contacting them. That's Vegas culture. I don't have that, although I will say it is contagious. So occasionally I feel that sniffle coming on, like, should I even bother? If you're an entrepreneur, you understand that the time that it takes to track people down and to remind them that they committed to a meeting or a call or something starts to become expensive. And that time could be better spent somewhere else, like on your own entrepreneurial effort. On the other hand, what I have found in the Las Vegas or Greater Vegas entrepreneurial ecosystem is that entrepreneurs here, perhaps because they're overly focused on what they are working on, will, and remember, these are entrepreneurs, will suggest that a problem should be tackled or solved by someone else. And I usually ask that person if they could play some role. Well, I don't have time. Yeah, but couldn't you, if you find it to be a problem, couldn't you try to help in some small way? Well, I don't have time though. I don't have time. It's me. But if it's such a problem for you and you are in an entrepreneurial endeavor, even if it's soaking up all of your time, apparently you have enough time to complain about this thing that is otherwise blocking or impeding or reducing your effective use of your time. So take a moment, see if there's some way you can spend an hour. Can I make a couple of calls? Can I make some connections between some people? Are there people who would be willing to take this on? Or is there a way I can help that person? If this is something that will help me get my entrepreneurial endeavor moving at the pace that I would like it to, what can I do with an hour a week, something small that I can commit to enable this solution? And if a couple of people can do that, you get a couple of person hours every week to make some calls, make some connections, get some information, figure out how to fund something, help with a slide deck, whatever it is, whatever needs to be done or whatever could be done, bounce some ideas around, try out a potential solution. Hey, does this do what we need it to do? Take a few minutes, give some feedback. These are elementary things. And I have found in the Greater Vegas area, this is very steep a hill to climb. And that's if people even respond to the email, which they usually don't. And finally, and I'm just venting here, this is my ad-libbed rant to end this episode, the beginning of season 2. There are people who believe they are entrepreneurs in the so-called startup scene because they show up to an event and they check the checkbox and they talk about ideas. And I'll be honest, I talk about ideas all the time, but I'm also busy trying to accomplish some of them. So some of the ideas I talk about, I'm not actively working on. Some of them I are. Some of them I am. But I've known people in the Vegas area. I've lived here for coming up on 12 years in August 2025. And I've known them for almost the whole time I've been here. And they haven't really launched anything, or they don't have anything working, but they're still in the scene. Sometimes they get awards for being a part of the startup scene, achievement, or I don't know what's going on with that. Launch your startup. That should be the reward. I need a certificate or a trophy. Don't people make fun of that enough at this point? So I'm hoping that the second startup scene, which I've only just started talking about, the second startup scene is not a single second startup scene, but it's the notion that if you are excited to be a part of the startup scene, even though you don't have a startup, you run with that. The second startup scene is about people who are doing it, who aren't checking a box for the free food, and who are making their stuff go. Those kinds of discussions are very different. Those kinds of meetups are very different. So that's on the agenda. It's not intended to be mean. It's intended to be practical. Like if you're in a house that's on fire, and you're like, I'm totally going to get out of this house at some point. The second startup scene, people are like, we're out of the house already. We're already on to the next thing. The house is going to burn down, but we're not in it anymore. The startup ideas are outside. The aspiration might be inside. It's a weird analogy, but I've actually escaped a house fire when I moved to Vegas. So apropos for me. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. It's not too long. My clock here says about 40 minutes, so I'll probably cut down to about 35 with some silence truncation. I will thank you for listening. I would like you to ponder, if you're listening to this episode, or any of the episodes of this show, if you've listened to the ones in the past, find something that's interesting, reach out, be a guest. Conversations are always better than monologues, in my opinion. Monologues are easier to plan, but a dialogue or a conversation between multiple people on some of these topics, or what you're working on, or our ecosystem, there are many interesting things to ponder, discuss, and solve. And that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you, as always, for listening. And do check out the Buy Me a Coffee Monday updates, the Buy Me an Update exclusively on Buy Me a Coffee. Totally free. None of this is costing you any money. Just under 5 minutes of your time on Mondays. And tell a friend if you like. That would be nice. And consider being a guest. And that is where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.